Hey everyone, I'm Brian with Aromacup.com, and thank you as always for joining me here in my virtual coffee shop brought to you by Aromacup.com. In today's video, I'm going to be giving you a side-by-side comparison between the brand new Starbucks Verismo single-serve coffee machine. I have the Model 580 here on my left-hand side. And on my right-hand side, we're going to be comparing to the Keurig B70 single-serve brewer. So let me dive in, tell you about some of the features, brew some coffee, brew some drinks, and we'll tell you about the differences between these machines so that you can make a decision for yourself. All right, the question you guys are going to be asking, the question we always get asked and that everyone's always wondering about, which of these machines is better? That's always the question, which is better? Well, neither one is necessarily better. You can make that decision based on what you really need out of a single-serve brewer. But here's the major difference between the two, just going right on into it. The major difference is that with the Verismo machine by Starbucks, you can make espresso drinks. It's essentially an espresso machine that also can brew regular brewed coffee. Now with the Keurig B70 and the Keurig machines, there's not an espresso option for brewing espresso with the Keurig machine. However, there's a number of different beverages that you can make with the Keurig machine. So that's the major difference, guys. We're going to start at the bottom on both of these machines. We're going to start with the tray. Now the tray on the Verismo initially has very little clearance right here. You're going to notice that I even have a very small mug right here, and I can't fit even this mug in. This is pretty much meant for when you're making an espresso drink and you use a very short glass of some kind. Now that's the initial configuration on the unit, but you can remove this part of the tray and then take the metal tray from that plastic part which you have removed and add that in order to give yourself a little more clearance. This lets you use larger mugs, tumblers, things like that. It's still a little bit limited when it comes to the amount of clearance that you have on the unit. So that is something that's a little bit different from the Keurig B70, where again we do have a removable tray, and that removable tray can just simply be pulled out from underneath the unit. This gives you a whole lot more clearance. So this allows me to really easily use large tumblers and glasses and things like that. Both of these trays are really easy to clean. You can simply pull the tray out for each one and clean it out. Now the difference also between these two with respect to the trays is that on the Verismo machine, when you pull the tray out, you're going to find that on the back of it you have this pod holder, and this is where your spent pods from the Verismo machine will drop down into as you use the machine. Now the Keurig does not have anything like that. The Keurig simply works based on you pulling out your spent pod anytime that you've used the machine. So there's no pod holder or anything like that on the tray. Moving on up on both of these machines, let's talk about button functionality and overall brewing ability and things like that. On the Verismo, it's a very, very simple operation. You have 3 buttons. On the top, you have the espresso button. This is also the button used for rinsing the machine and priming the machine. In the middle, you have the brewed button. The brewed is for brewing coffee using the Keurig brewed coffee pods. We'll talk about those pods in a little bit. And on the bottom, you have the milk pod button, and this is for making only milk Keurig pods using the Verismo machine. Now again, remember, this is a distinct difference between these two machines. This machine has a dedicated espresso button because it can make espresso-based drinks. Moving over to the Keurig, again, very simple button operation, few more buttons, however. In the middle, we have the brew button. That's pretty straightforward. That's what we use when we're ready to brew a beverage. We also have these 2 buttons on the left and right-hand side of the menu button. Now, the menu button is going to allow you to access a lot of different functions on this LCD screen that you have right here on the unit. And that's because on the Keurig machine, you can set a clock, you can set an auto off time, you can set an on and off time, you can set your brew temperature, and you can set your default brew size. So these are all functions which the Verismo machine just very simply does not have. You can't change the brew temperature, you can't set a default brew size, various things like that. So that's a big difference between these two machines when it comes to the operation of each one and the features. A lot more buttons and a lot more different brew features on the Keurig machine as opposed to the Starbucks machine. Another big difference is that with the Keurig machine, you can customize your overall brew size, your beverage size. You can't do that with the Verismo machine. You can in a certain way by stopping the brew cycle, but there is no automatic mode in order to actually change the beverage size that you're going to get out of the machine. So that's something to keep in mind. Let's talk about the pod holders and brewing central stations of each of these units. Now on the Verismo, it uses a lever mechanism. This is sort of like some of the Nespresso machines that we've talked about in the past. This lever mechanism simply, when it is opened up, it opens up the pod holder. This is where you can place your pod and then close it up and start the brewing process. So it's pretty straightforward to use, not many ways that you can mess up brewing with the Verismo machine. Over here on the Keurig machine, we have the Keurig brew basket, which we've come to know pretty well on all of the Keurig machines. And this is pretty straightforward, wherein you simply place a K-cup into your Keurig machine, close up the brew basket, and then you can start brewing. Let's talk about the last feature on both of these, and that's the water tank. Now, the water tank on the back of the Verismo, one of the things I have to say that I really like about this machine is that it's one of the most easily removable water tanks. It's got this handle right here, and you can simply just pull on it and then just remove it from the machine. Now, on this unit that we have, there is not a water filter built into this tank. So you need to use filtered or distilled water if you want to get the best tasting beverage out of the machine. Over here on the Keurig, the water tank is mounted a little bit differently. It's mounted just right here on the side, and you can always keep an eye on it to know how much water you have in the tank. A little bit of a larger water tank. Again, on this specific tank, there is not a water filter on this one. And so again, you're going to want to use some kind of distilled or filtered water in order to get the best possible beverage out of the machine. You can buy a filter for the Keurig machine, and so that will allow you to use just regular tap water in your machine if that's something that's going to be a selling point for you. So with the functionality covered on both of these machines, let's talk about the pods for each one. Now, the Verismo machine uses a pod that can only be used with the Verismo machine, and that is called the K-Fee pod. And this is very simple and easy to use. These pods are the same size depending on if you're using an espresso pod. I have here a house blend brewed coffee K-Fee pod, and there are also milk pods for this machine. Now that is a distinct difference between both of these machines, where there is a milk pod for the Verismo machine. There are no milk pods for the Keurig machines. Now let me show you a Keurig K-cup in comparison. You notice that these are obviously very different in size. K-cups, just the same as K-Fee pods, have a foil liner on the top, and they're both vacuum sealed, so that makes sure that the coffee inside of them stays as fresh as possible. So both machines do puncture that pod when it's time to start brewing. Now, again, another major difference here is that there are espresso pods for the Verismo machine. There are not espresso pods for the Keurig machine. However, there are a number of different pods for the Keurig machine, including hot chocolates, hot teas, iced coffees, and of course your regular hot teas and hot coffees. So you have a lot of different choices that you can take advantage of when you're using a Keurig machine. Right now, with the Verismo machine, there's only a few different types of K-Fee pods, and those are the brewed pods for making coffee. You have milk pods for making milk. You can get kits, which will allow you to make cafe lattes, and then you can also get espresso K-Fee pods. So you have a few different options there, but again, there's no preset K-Fee pods for doing hot teas, hot chocolates, things like that. Not at this time. We suspect that those will be coming soon enough, however. So those are the major differences between each of these machines, guys. Again, just to reiterate before we start brewing a little bit here, big difference is the Verismo machine can do espresso-based drinks, whereas the Keurig machine cannot. However, the Keurig machine definitely has a wider array of beverage types that you can make just using the K-cups. All right, so speaking of brewing and pods and beverages, let's go ahead and brew some beverages with both of these machines. So let me tell you how it's done, because there are some distinct differences between both of them. Let's start with the Verismo machine. Now, the first thing that you need to do before you even put a pod into the Verismo machine is you need to prime it and clean it. When you first turn the machine on, or when the machine has been sitting for a while and turns itself off, when you turn it on, you'll find that only the first button on the machine is going to glow green. And if only that button is glowing, that means that you need to run a rinse cycle. However, I have found that if you leave the machine sitting for just a little bit, you should go ahead and run this rinse and priming cycle no matter what. So I'm just going to put a mug underneath my brew station right here, and I'm going to hit the first button on the machine. Now that's going to run just a little bit of water through the machine. It's going to clean out any residual coffee that might be left behind in the machine from other drinks that we have brewed. And it's not going to use too much water, which is good. And you can just set that aside, dump it in the sink or anything like that. Now the machine is ready to start brewing. So you can open up the brew lever on the top of the machine. And again, we're talking about making coffee. So here's something really important, and this is something that is very different between these two machines. On the Verismo machine and the Keurig pods, flip that pod over, and you're going to notice that there's a little foil seal on the bottom of this pod. You have to remove that foil seal before you can start brewing with this machine. So there is an extra step. And that is something that I have forgotten from time to time. And I just popped one of these pods in, and I've forgotten to take that seal off. So you have to make sure to take that off to expose the filter that is inside of the pod. When you have done that, you can drop that pod into the Verismo machine, close up the brew lever, you'll feel a little bit of pressure, and now you can start brewing your coffee. Now, I'm going to go ahead and press the second button down here in the middle of the 3 buttons on the Verismo to start the brewed process. Now, again, this is the major difference between these two pods on these two machines, which is that on a K-Cup, you don't need to remove any seal from the bottom or anything like that. The K-Cup gets punctured from both sides by the Keurig machine, and that gets it ready for the brew process. So let me show you how we brew on the Keurig B70. We're just going to open up the brew basket right here, pop our K-Cup in. We don't need to pop it in any specific direction or anything like that. We can just throw it into the machine. Close that up, you'll hear it puncture that K-Cup, and now it's ready to start brewing. With that said and done, we're going to go ahead and brew some coffee. On the Keurig machine, again, you can set your beverage size. So this differs from machine to machine, but with the B70, you can use these buttons to the left and right of the menu button in order to choose the beverage size that you would like to make. I'm going to choose the second to largest beverage size, and then I'm just going to press the brew button. Now the machine will start the brew process. I can just set it and walk away and let it do its brew. Now that is the same thing for the Verismo machine. I can just simply start the brewing process and walk away. So when it comes to ease of brewing, both of these really just come down to being able to pop a pod in and start the brew process. So this is our coffee from the Verismo machine. I do have to say that the quality of the coffee out of the Verismo is quite good. It's very hot, which is great. I know that some folks have said in the past that many single-serve brewers have not given them the heat that they expect out of the beverage that they're making. But I've found that the temperature is quite good coming out of the Verismo. The flavor of the coffee is very, very good. And the machine is very easy to use. Both of these machines, when it comes to the amount of time that it takes to brew, both move pretty quickly. I mean, you can see that here I'm brewing a larger cup of coffee with my Keurig machine, but it's moving quite fast to brew that cup of coffee. And when that is all done, I'm done. I have my cup of coffee and I'm ready to go. Again, there's a large amount of different types of K-Cups for the Keurig machines, so you're going to find that depending on the beverage that you want, you're probably going to find that you like one a little bit more than another, but I've been pretty impressed with the coffee that comes out of the Keurig machine as well. Okay, so that's making coffee with both of these machines pretty quick and easy. Now again, big difference between these two is that you can make espresso-based drinks using the Verismo machine. So we're going to make a cafe latte using the Verismo. I'm going to open up that lever, and that's going to drop that spent pod down and into the machine. Now I am going to make a cafe latte. Now I'm going to do this, as I say, there are kits that you can get which will have both espresso, Keurig pods, and milk pods in them. We're just using 2 separate boxes today. I have here the espresso roast Keurig pod, and I'm going to use some of the K-Fee milk pods as well. And this is all that you need in order to make a cafe latte as per Starbucks instructions. So let me show you how that's done, because it's pretty easy with this machine. Remember, you can't do this with the Keurig machine. So we're going to take a mug, place it underneath our brew station right now, and the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to make our K-Fee milk pod. All we need to do is take that pod, pop it into the brew station right here, close up that lever, and now we're going to press the third button down. That's the milk button on the Verismo. Now, while the milk pod is brewing, let's mention one of the other things that the Keurig machine can do that the Starbucks machine currently cannot, and that is making hot tea. As I say, there's a number of different K-cup varieties, and one of the ones I have here is an English breakfast hot tea K-cup. So let's go ahead and make some hot tea. I'm going to open up my brew basket, I'm going to take out my spent K-cup, and now I'm just going to pop my hot tea K-cup into my machine. And I'm going to use a smaller mug for this. So again, as I say, I can adjust the brew size that I would like to make with the machine. I'm going to choose the smallest brew size because I'm using a relatively small cup. Choose the smallest brew size and just simply press the brew button. All right, so we'll let the Keurig go ahead and do its job now. Now over here on the Starbucks side, I have my milk that's ready. Now remember, as I say, this is sort of an espresso machine that can also do coffee. Good thing about that is there's a 19-bar pressure pump inside this machine, and that's what allows you to get that kind of froth foam that you expect to get on a cafe latte. So with that said, let's go ahead and make the espresso for the other half of our cafe latte. Open up the brew lever on the top of the machine. Now here's the difference with the espresso K-Fee pods as opposed to the brewed K-Fee pods. There is no silver foil that you need to remove on the bottom of the espresso pod. So just remember that. With the espresso pod, you can just drop it into the machine. I'm going to drop that in, close up the brew lever, and now we're going to press the first button in the row of buttons. That's the espresso button. And if you do find that you're pressing that button and you're not getting a brew cycle starting just yet, that means that the machine is still heating up. And then anytime that you press that button and you still don't get any brew, you're going to have to just wait until the machine's ready to go. So that is something to keep in mind. You're going to want to look and see if those buttons are glowing and blinking green on the front of the machine. If they are, the machine needs a little bit more time in order to get itself ready. Over here on the Keurig side, we have our tea. That's ready and done. And again, I got to choose the brew size, which is pretty cool. It's something I do like about the Keurig machine. You can really dial in your beverage preference. Over here on the Starbucks side, however, we do have a cafe latte, and that is pretty cool, and that is something that you cannot do with the Keurig machine, being able to make use of milk pods and espresso pods and things like that. One of the other differences between these two is that with the Keurig, you can make your own coffee. Again, you have that large array of different beverages and beverage sizes that you can choose from. You can dial things in a little more distinctly to exactly as you like for things to be. And that's a big one, being able to make your own coffee with this machine. You can't do that with the Verismo machine, not at this time. You have to use K-Fee pods, whereas with a Keurig machine, you can use a My K-cup or a solo fill cup and various options that allow you to make your own coffee using your Keurig machine. So, those are all the distinct differences. Now the one that everyone's going to be wondering about is going to be pricing between these two machines. At the making of this video, the retail pricing between these two is the same. $199 is the manufacturer's suggested retail price. You may be able to find that different depending on where you're shopping and various things like that. But that's where we thought these two machines would be very comparable because they both have about the same price point. But again, there are some distinct differences between the two. Let's go ahead and outline those one more time for you. Trays are a little bit different on both of these. They can be resized based on the tumbler or cup size that you want to use for each one. The button operation on each machine, again, a little bit different. The Verismo machine, very simple with the 3 buttons dedicated to 3 different beverage types. Over here on the Keurig machine, you do have a few more buttons, but you also have many more choices for your beverage when it comes to choosing your beverage size, choosing the temperature of your beverage, and being able to choose how it is that you want to brew your beverage. When it comes to the pods, again, very different between the two, different brewing types for each one. You have the K-Fee pods over here on the Starbucks Verismo machine. You have K-cups on the Keurig B70, so that's 2 distinct differences. They're not interchangeable, remember that. Those pods, as I say, very different between the two. The pods with the Verismo machine allowing you to make espresso drinks, brewed coffee, and milk-based drinks. The Keurig machine cannot do milk-based drinks, at least it does not have pods which allow you to make milk, and it also does not do espresso-based drinks, but it does do a number of different beverages, hot cocos, hot coffees, iced teas, iced coffees, and of course, hot coffees, hot teas, and various things like that. Can't do hot teas and a number of other different beverages over here on the Verismo machine, at least not just yet. Water tank on both of these is about comparable, except for the fact that you can get a filter for your Keurig machine. There is not currently a filter for the Verismo machine. Either way, you want to use filtered water on both of these. I think that that's always going to give you the best possible beverage. When it comes to the pressure between both of these, there's a 19-bar pressure pump inside of the Verismo machine. The Keurig machine also has quite a powerful pressure pump. It needs that in order to be able to brew the coffee or any other beverage that you might be making to just the right pressure. Temperature-wise, they're both about comparable when it comes to the beverage that's coming out of both of them. And really, when it comes to the price point at $199 for each one, it really just comes down to what it is that you want out of your single-serve brewer. And like I say, major big difference, espresso drinks over here, no espresso drinks here, but definitely a larger array of beverages, with the exception of espresso drinks, that you can make using the Keurig B70. So there you go, guys. There's some coffee brewed out of both of these machines and a couple different beverages from each one. I hope that you found this useful and that it helps you to make your own informed decision when you go out to purchase one of these machines. You can check out all of our videos to find out more about the operation of both of these and how you can make a lot of different beverages with each of these machines. As always, guys, I'm Brian with Aromacup.com, reminding you to enjoy your cup, take care, and I'll see you next time.